Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, Mr. Chairman, members of the Council. My name is David Dince. I am the Director of Litigation and New York Senior Counsel at the Brandeis Center for Human Rights. The Brandeis Center is an independent, unaffiliated, nonprofit legal organization established to advance the civil and human rights of the Jewish people and promote justice for all. We combat the resurgence of anti-Semitism on college and university campuses, in K-12 schools, in the workplace, and elsewhere. Our rapidly expanding New York office focuses on litigation in all of these areas wherever anti-Semitism is found and can be combated by the law. We are here today to comment concerning the legal principles to be considered in relation to the proposed bill to amend the Administrative Code to plan to establish security buffer zones at places of religious worship. The Brandeis Center is pleased that the Council is addressing a problem that we have been facing in New York and elsewhere. We are facing a crisis of anti-Semitism confronting the besieged Jewish population of New York City, whereby various individuals, groups, and organizations have adopted a tactic of protest at houses of worship, including synagogues. They are impeding the ability of worshipers to enter or exit the building and trampling on their First Amendment right to freedom of religion. This must be stopped. The Brandeis Center has been contacted by numerous individuals who have been blocked from entering their synagogue due to the presence of protesters, some of which have led to assaults and property destruction. The issue before this committee is now the question of buffer zones, which are needed to ensure that the prohibited conduct does not occur in the first place. In fashioning any such bill, first, the bill must be carefully drawn to apply to all houses of worship. Second, it must recognize the First Amendment right to freedom of speech and protest while balancing those rights against the worshipers' equally important First Amendment right to practice their religion. It is well recognized under the law that appropriate time, place, and manner restrictions are lawful when balancing these competing rights.
Can you just describe some of the incidents that took place outside of some of these houses of worship, synagogues? If the Brandeis Center has taken note of those?
Sure. Well, I think that committee members are probably very aware of the Park East Synagogue, where people outside were harassed, were threatened, were blocked from entering and exiting the synagogue. And I think one of the points that's so important to make are twofold. One is that there are competing constitutional rights here. There's the clear constitutional right to freedom of speech and to protest, but that is being weighed here against the equally important First Amendment right to freedom of religion and freedom of association of the worshipers. And the question being, how do you balance those rights and how do you provide protection for those who are exercising their First Amendment rights to freedom of religion? The second point that I think is important to make is that the actual blocking of these entrances is only one part of it. The other part of it is, of course, the intimidation factor, and that word is used carefully and defined in statute in the bill that's being proposed, and rightfully so. If I were to suggest that committee members keep one picture in your mind as you contemplate this bill, it would be to think of a young mother with two children holding the hands of two young children as they approach a synagogue, the mother going into worship, the two children being dropped off at religious school, and they're forced to walk a gauntlet of angry, hateful people, screaming epithets, making threats of physical violence. And I think the only reasonable conclusion from that is that people would be intimidated, that young mother would be intimidated and would be dissuaded from entering their house of worship, which I think is really important to keep that in mind when we're weighing these constitutional rights. But we have certainly seen and heard from people who have been assaulted. We have heard of destruction of property inside the synagogues once some protesters get inside, and we have heard from numerous people who are just so frightened that they turn away from their house of worship, from their synagogue.
Thank you. And some opponents of the bill claim that the intro 1A I'm referring to, that synagogues are used for events they view as non-religious, and therefore they claim there should be no limitations on their right to protest. Can you address that?
Yes, thank you for that question, Councilwoman. I think there are a couple of points to be made in that regard. The first is that this legislation does not restrict the right to protest in any fashion. It simply preserves the right to enter unencumbered and not intimidated. Second, I think lawmakers should be, and I would respectfully submit this, should be loath to address the issue of what constitutes faith and what constitutes worship. Because that's what you're going to get into if you're going to decide why somebody is entering a synagogue and what their purpose is. And third, I would point out that there are always multiple activities going on in a synagogue at the same time. So while there may be something that's dealing with a more secular issue, at the same time, there will be people praying, there will be people attending religious school, and so on. So trying to parse those things, I think, is a dangerous exercise that the legislation shouldn't touch.
Thank you. And do you have an opinion as it regards to the buffer zone that's required?
We are not taking a specific position on the size of the buffer zone. I think it's reasonable to leave that to the NYPD using the reasonableness standard that they described in their earlier testimony. However, I'm going to go back to my same point. It must take into account the intimidation factor and providing a buffer zone which protects the worshipers from being intimidated.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going